A warm welcome to another interesting episode of the Law Gallery coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. I remain Khalid Bada, and I've lined up, just as always, I've lined up interesting packages for your pleasure today, starting with the media news update. So sit tight as we bring you the news updates on the show today. We'll be right back.
Hello and thank you for joining us on the news update of the Law Gallery. I am Esther Agbo. Lagos Supreme Court Judge Tijani Ringim has convicted clearing officer Felix Olame, who was arrested by the Nigerian Customs Service with a container of pangolin scales, ivory tusk and bones. Judge Ringim convicted the liquidators after pleading guilty to 3 customs charges. Convicted clearing agents David Ere and Mike Orson were charged with possessing a 1 by 20-foot container marked CSLU 2362640, according to prosecutors in January 2021 at Apapa, Lagos. Arrested at the port, it contained 158 bags of pangolin scales and 57 packs of pangolin scales. Pangolin scales contained elephant ivory, horn, and bone. Prosecutors told the court that the convicts conspired with several other alleged fugitives to commit the crime. The prosecution told the court that the crimes committed by the convicts violated Article 516 of the Nigerian Federal Penal Code 2004 and are subject to punishment. It also falls under Article 7(3) of the National Environment Protection of Endangered Species in International Trade, Regulations 201, and may be penalized under Article 7(4) of those regulations. After the indictment was read out, the convict pleaded guilty. In a response to his plea, the prosecution asked the court to review the charges and convict him accordingly. But the lawyer petitioned the court to temper justice with mercy, saying his client was being used by those who wanted to smuggle goods. Moving on to the next story, the Economic and Financial Crime Commission, Maiduguri Regional Command, completed the case against former Electricity Minister Mohammed Wakil and 4 others on Wednesday, 14th June 2023. After presenting 3 witnesses, the prosecution closed the case before Judge K. Dagat of the Federal Court of Maiduguri, Borno State. Wakil, alongside Galba Bacha and Ibrahim Sheikh Voma, is a Dr. Abubakar Ali Kilma and Engineer Mohammed Baba Kachara, was again charged with conspiracy to launder money worth 450 million naira on 7 counts. They are said to have received the sum of $115 million spent by former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Dezani Alison Madueke, to influence the outcome of the 2015 presidential election. They pleaded not guilty to the charges. Before the case was closed, prosecutor Makta Ali Ahmed appeared in court with S.O. Saka, Farouk Mohammed, A.D. Aliyu, V.O. Ekanem, and A. Ayo Shola provided evidence, including the testimony of the defendant, proof of payments from the 3 constituencies of the Senate, a draft of the first defendant, and a reply letter from Fidelity Bank detailing the means of identification of the first and second defendants admitted in evidence, submitted some documents. Judge Dagas then adjourned until October 3, 4, and 5, 2023, to allow the defendants to begin their defense. Away from that, the National Economic Council has set up a committee made of governors from each of the geopolitical zones to review suggestions from the Salary and Wages Commission to address the impact of the removal of the fuel subsidy on the populace. It is considered recommendations for the National Salaries, Income and Wages Commission to pay 702 billion as cost of living allowance to civil servants as part of intervention plans to mitigate the effects of the removal of subsidy as announced by the President Bola Tinubu on May 29, 2023. The governor of Bauchi, Bala Mohammed, made the disclosure while briefing alongside his counterpart from Katsina, Aliyu Rada, Kogi, Yahaya Bello, Habia Alex Oti, and Ogun State Dakpo Abiodun. Mohammed also reveals that the intervention includes a recommended sum ranging from 23.5 billion to 45 billion per month as petroleum allowance for civil servants. President Tinubu had directed the governors to concretize various palliative structure to ease the attendant hardship from the petrol subsidy discontinuance. According to Mohammed, the NEC has received recommendations on the various ways and means that the country can use whatever increases that we have in the revenue to mitigate the impact that this is going to make on the lives of our workers. And that's it on News Update for today. We go on a short break now to join Khalid and Barrister Idris Balogun in their discussion. Bye for now.
Welcome back to the program. It's still the Law Gallery coming to you from the Lagos studio. And as you know, this is the part of the show where we get to discuss the Nigerian law, the Nigerian rule of law, and concepts surrounding the law practices in Nigeria. You know, I don't do it alone. I always have a legal practitioner, usually brilliant legal practitioners with me, you know, to do justice to our discussion. But before we do that, I have to read this out. You know, recall that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu signed the Data Protection Bill into law earlier this week. This is in a bid to improve Nigerian privacy rights and fundamental freedom in cyberspace and analog transaction. Now, the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau has transmuted into a full-fledged commission and is mandated to 1. Regulate the deployment of technical and organizational measures to enhance data protection, then foster the development of data protection technologies. Finally, impose penalties in respect of any violation of the provision of the Act or subsidiary legislation made thereof. Now, today we are joined by Barrister Idris Balogun, who will be doing justice to the data protection law and the data privacy rights in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us, Barrister.
It's a pleasure.
I hope I got the pronunciation right.
Perfectly.
Idris Balogun. Yes.
Yes.
Now, I'm sure you're aware that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu passed the data protection law into the bill into a law.
Yes.
Now, I would like to hear your opinion about that. What do you have to say to that?
Thank you. Now, the data protection bill, which was signed into law by the president, as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it's a news we've always wanted, we've always clamored for, that's especially advocate of the data protection. Now, before the bill was signed into law, we've always had a regulation, that's the NDPB, that's Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, which was issued by National Information Technology Development Agency, that's NITDA. Now, NDPR, as it were, being a regulation is not a full law in the sense of it. Now, it oversees the affairs of data protection in Nigeria, the regulation, the supervision, and all of those. Now, by the virtue of the president signing the Nigerian Data Protection Bill into law, it gives data protection a full fledged of having to protect data privacy, that's data subjects, and having to regulate the activities of data controllers and data processors with heavy sanctions for any violation of data breaches from either the data processors or data controllers. So it's actually a welcome idea, and kudos to the president for that.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Now, how would you describe the current state of the Nigerian data privacy law? Would you say it's in a full manifestation? Would you say it's in full functioning mode, or there is still something to work on?
Well, thank you for that. Well, we all know Nigeria is a developing country. Okay. We've not gotten there, so gradually it's a gradual thing, it's a gradual process. Let me memory lane.
Okay.
The Constitution, we all know the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have by the power of the fifth alteration now, is the grand norm of every law. So any law that is inconsistent with the Constitution is void ab initio. That if any subsidiary legislation or any act is inconsistent with any of the provisions of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is void ab initio and holds no water. Now, in chapter 4 of the Constitution, it provides for rights of every human person in Nigeria. We have right to life, right to dignity, right to movement, right to acquire property, and rights to privacy. That's Section 37 now. Every human person in Nigeria is fundamentally empowered to have the right to privacy. And if you believe that your right is about to be violated, is being violated, or has been violated, you can approach a court of competent jurisdiction to enforce your fundamental human right. Same applies to privacy too. Be it telephone communication, correspondence, or you approach a healthcare facility and you believe that the data you submitted at these facilities or by telecommunication networks are being breached or are being used for outside the purpose for which they were obtained, you can approach the court of competent jurisdiction to enforce your fundamental human rights. So right to privacy is a fundamental human right of every Nigerian in Nigeria. Now, every other law derives its source or derives its power from the Constitution. Now we have the Nigerian Data Protection Bill signed into law. Before the bill was signed into law, we have the Nigerian Data Privacy Regulation, which regulates anything that has to do with data protection in Nigeria, which was issued by NITDA. Before the bill was signed into law, it is an offense to obtain data without the consent of the data subject. That's you and I. We are data subject. Now, the data controllers, it could be employers, it could be healthcare facilities, it could be telecommunication networks. So, but if they collect this data, they are called data collectors. And these facilities or these telecommunication networks, they assign people to process this data. These people are called data processors. Now, if data processors or data controllers act outside the purview for which this data were collected, or outside the purpose for which this data were collected, they are in violation of the data protection law. Now, by the virtue of the president signing the data protection bill into law, it gives the data protection a full flesh. Recall that I said the NDPB is just a regulation, not a full law. Not a full law. So it has limits. It has limits to what it can do. But by the virtue of Nigeria having a full data protection law now, so let me say we've not gotten there, but it's a gradual thing. So we've actually come to the manifestation of Nigeria having a data protection law in Nigeria.
Now, I would like us to talk about BVN, NIN, social media registration, bank account registration. Now, we know that if you're going to perhaps register your NIN, you need to drop your data.
Yes.
If you're going to register your SIM card, you drop your data. If you register your BVN, you drop your data. Is there no bridge between these different registrations? I mean, perhaps I have my NIN or my BVN, and I probably entered it into probably a social media app or a social media network. Do they not have access to my data due to the fact that, okay, I've entered my BVN or my NIN? I don't know. That just popped into my mind.
Okay, now all of this, they are personal. They are personal and they are very sensitive. They are personal and sensitive data, which must be guarded judiciously and jealously. Now, by the virtue of you exposing such data, maybe to your social media account, you are making it obvious, or you're making it obvious to the public, and by so doing, people can actually encroach into your data and make use of them for unwanted usage. Now, for BVN, for NIN, mind you, BVN is peculiar to financial institutions, while NIN is maybe being used by the federal government. Fine, there's actually no I don't know how to put it now, like a brokerage in the sense of it between NIN and BVN, like merging both together. However, once you submit your BVN at the financial institution is by the provision of the law now is supposed to guard such information jealously and judiciously without suspicious attack. The same thing applies to NIN too. By the virtue of you registering for NIN, the federal government, through the agency that's the NIN, Nigerian Identification Management Commission, is saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that that NIN is guarded jealously and judiciously without suspicious attack.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, I'm a journalist, and you know I would always want to ask something in respect to journalism. Now, how does the data protection law, does the scope of the data protection law, does it stretch to organizations or private institutions? Now, take for an example, I approach a private institution and I probably request a data. As a journalist, I would like to, you know, make use of this data in my news report or, you know, for documentary purposes. Do they have the right to say no? And if peradventure I was able to get the data from another source, do they have the right to sue me?
Okay, thank you. Now, by the virtue of the law, a data subject, that's you and I, once we have surrendered our data to any organization, it could be a financial institution, it could be an healthcare facility, such data collectors are not allowed, by the provision of law, are not allowed to give a third party such data, except either by the consent of the data subject, that's you and I, or by an order of a competent court, of a court of competent jurisdiction, pardon me.
Okay.
Now, before you are giving such data, the data subject, that's the owner, the provider of the data, must have consented to the fact that
The data
go ahead with the sharing of the data,
yes.
or there's an order from a court of competent jurisdiction. So a journalist working up to a financial institution or to an healthcare facility to obtain data of the data subject, the data subject, upon knowing that data has been shared to a third party without his consent or without an order of a court of competent jurisdiction, he can sue the healthcare facility or the financial institution for violation of his data privacy.
Thank you very much. Now, what could be the legal implication of perhaps an individual or a company issuing out data without the consent of the data owner?
Thank you.
Or the data issuer?
Thank you. Number one, the law provides for payment of default. Now, if a company or organization is in default is in violation of data privacy, is in breach of data privacy, the law provides that one, the data subject can lodge a complaint to the Data Protection Commission. Let me say something. Let me chip in something. Then, before the Data Protection Bill was signed into law, there was the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau. Now, by the virtue of this bill coming into law full-fledged, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission was established by this law now. It replaces the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau. Then the Nigerian Data Protection Bureau was saddled with the responsibility of governing, of regulating things that has to do with data privacy, data protection in Nigeria. And so for any company that is in default of such violation, the NDPB, maybe sanctions such company. Now, the responsibility is now on the Nigerian Data Protection Commission. So if a complaint is being laid to the commission will ensure investigation, a formal investigation, and upon being found guilty, such defaulting organization or company will pay 2 million naira, that's 2% of its annual gross.
Wow.
Yes, 2% of its annual gross, or 10 million naira, whichever is greater, of the preceding year. That's for data controllers controlling over 10,000 data subjects. But if the data controller is controlling less than 10,000 data subjects, such defaulting company will pay 1% of its annual gross income of the preceding year, or 5 million or 2 million naira, whichever is greater.
What if it were to be an unintentional action? Let's say there was a breach on the server, or they were hacked, or perhaps there was a glitch which leaked data. What could have happened in such situation? It would be out of their control.
Well, one of the provisions of the law is every data controller must appoint data protection officers, must appoint DPC, or that data protection compliance officer. These officers must ensure that the data they obtain are guarded judiciously and jealously, because you're talking about the life of people. If take for instance, if your data gets breached, gets to the public, it could be used for something unwarranted or something suspicious, and it could lead to reputational loss. It could lead to reputational damage, or even it could lead to emotional trauma. Take for instance, someone who approaches an healthcare facility and complains that maybe he's suffering from some terminal ailment and all of those. So it is expected that such healthcare facility must guard such data judiciously, mind my words, judiciously and jealously. So there's no excuse that it was an act or it was a mistake on the part of the company and organization. No, you have to pay your default fee. You have to pay
now,
it.
Now, as an individual, how can I protect my data? Let's take for an example. Fine, on the part of the organization that have acquired my data, it is their right to protect it.
Yes.
But as an individual, what can I do as an individual to protect my data personally?
Thank you. Now, as an individual, foremost, should you be approaching any institution or organization, and it is, take for instance, that you want to pick up a job with an organization, you have to submit, you have to fill forms, and by so doing, you are submitting your data. So it is expected that you are sure that that company and organization has a strong data protection structure in place. You must ensure that that's your own step, your own way of ensuring your data is protected. You must ensure that that company and organization request for your data has a strong data protection structure in place. And also, we all make use of phones and apps and social media. So you must ensure that this 2FA, that's two-factor authentication, is enabled in not almost now, in all of your accounts. It could be bank accounts, it could be phones, it could be social media accounts, and all of those. Your mobile banking apps too. You must ensure that your two-factor authentication is enabled in all of these apps. So it's words of encroachment, it's words of breach of such. And also, individuals should be wary of clicking on suspicious websites. No, we are like when you see, okay, click on this, share this with 2 people and get 10 million naira. And we just not unknowing to you, you are going into this fraudsters account and all of those. So you have to be wary of the sites you click on, and also you have to be wary of the sites you go to. So, and these phishing attempts too, you have to be wary of that too. And also, you know your rights. You know your rights.
Now, we've seen cases naturally. Okay, let me put up this question to you. When you're registering on perhaps a social media app or an online application, do you read the terms and conditions?
Well,
trust me, I know nobody reads
everyone is guilty of that. Same as me. I'm always guilty of that. But in all of these terms and conditions, it provides that the data you're submitting might be used for something. Yes, but you're just, I'm the ace to let me just sign off and then just log in. By so doing, you are submitting your data for the usage of that social media app. Like the law, it is the law that every company or any organization that has a website must ensure that their data privacy is on the website. And there's a link on that website directing users of that website to the link. So every website of any company must ensure that they have data privacy, which must be uploaded on their website. And there's a link directing users of such websites to their data privacy.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Now, we know we are in the generation of AI. This is the 21st century,
Yeah,
and
technology.
AI is growing every day. I've seen cases of where people use AI to create the image of another person, usually celebrities. I've seen cases of Ken Reeves, Sylvester Stallone being
Even
created.
even the Pope of
Even
the
the
Vatican
Pope, yes,
City.
even
yes.
Pope. I'm sure you saw
Yeah,
that too.
I saw that.
Now, what does the law say about such? Is that not an encroachment on such person's data rights? Because you're using my image. This is not even my name or my date of birth or something. You're using my full image. Does that not kind of encroach on the data protection rights?
That's another topic on its own. That's in the broad sense now, intellectual property. But let me quickly say something now. I believe, or supposedly it is believed, that before such AI are created for this kind of persons, they might have sought and obtained the consent of this person before such are created, because you can just create an AI of celebrity, or not only a celebrity now, just a random person, and you think you won't be penalized for it. So I believe, or supposedly I believe, that consent must have been sought and obtained from such persons. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, when we started the discussion, you said Nigeria is it's a developing country, and we all know that. For every sector in Nigeria, we have loopholes. Now, what do you think are the current challenges that the Nigerian data protection law is facing, and how do you think we can actually correct them?
Okay, thank you. And the first one is, well, thanks to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that signed the data protection bill into law recently. This has been in the tunnel for some time now, and thanks to him for actually achieving such. It is a welcome idea and a welcome development for people in the legal space, especially advocates and champions of data protection. One of the challenges, or the challenges we are facing in the data protection space, is we do not have a strong data protection law. Even if we have a strong data protection law, we do not have a strong or a competent enforcement structure. And this same challenge applies to almost all our laws. We have beautiful laws, we have fantastic laws. I make bold to say Nigeria has not less than 100 laws, ranging from international to domestic, from regional to municipal, and all of those. But almost all our laws are largely enforced in their breaches. So we only they now seem to be like toothless bulldogs that can only bark
And not bite.
and not bite. Thank you. Now, fine, we have fantastic data protection law. So it is not only about the law now; it's about the enforcement. We have weak enforcement agencies, so to speak, and it is not only peculiar to data protection now; it applies to almost all our laws. We have beautiful laws, but the enforcement is nothing to write home. Is nothing to write home about. Take for instance, one of the sanctions. One of the sanctions is if a company should violate any of the provision of the law or the data protection law, or if there's any act of breach from any company, such company must pay 2% of its annual gross income, or 10 million naira, whichever is greater, for any data controller controlling not less than 10%. But if there's any suspicion of data breach, and we have officials from this agency walk into the organization, and the Nigerian factor exactly settings, and these things are just die in natural death. Take for instance, I think in Ireland, Instagram was penalized heavily for breach of users' privacy. The same thing applied to Meta, that's Facebook too. Facebook was also, I think it was in Ireland too. Facebook was penalized for breach of
TikTok
data.
also faced the penalty
Exactly.
in the US.
We have a lot of companies facing huge sanctions for violations of their users' data. So we have beautiful laws. The law is not our problem in Nigeria. It is the enforcement, the implementation of these laws. And I think one of the challenges we are facing is corruption in the sense of it. We are facing Nigeria.
Now, day in, day out, we hear cases of companies violating data protection law. sometimes they come into the arguments that, okay, it was not their fault, they were hacked, it was a glitch and all. How can these companies comply, you know, to these laws? How can they, you know, comply strictly to them?
Thank you. Number one is they should be law compliant.
Okay.
That's why it is expedient for companies to have legal and compliance officer in their respective organizations and companies. So these legal officers or this compliance officer will advise appropriately and accordingly on the steps to take when it comes to legal aspect. And also, it is the law that every company, every data process, every data controller, rather now, that's companies and organizations, must appoint a data protection officer in their respective organizations. So this data protection officer is on his own task or his own responsibility. It is mainly for data protection in that company. And every company must appoint a data protection compliance officer. So it could be in that company or it could be outsourced. So this data protection compliance officer, DPCO, ensure that the company follows strictly the provisions of the data protection law. And also it is a provision of the law that every company must, every company controlling data must file annual returns with the then NDPB, now the Nigerian Data Protection Commission Now it is data protection compliance officer that can help in that regard. So these are the ways a company can ensure that they follow the provisions of the law.
Now, in a scenario, my data has been breached.
Okay.
What can I do? What are the legal steps to take?
Okay. Recall I said earlier that it is expedient that an individual knows his right. It is actually sardonic and saddening that most of Nigerians walking on the streets knows next to not when it comes to their rights.
True.
You don't know, maybe you have a right to life, right to human dignity, right to movement, right to acquisition of property, and all of those. Now, one of your rights, fundamentally empowered and fundamentally enshrined in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is right to privacy. Your telephone conversations was private. Your exchange of correspondence is private. The data you provide for your companies in your healthcare facility is private and must be guarded judiciously and jealously. So if you think that your data is about to be violated, or is being violated, or was violated, you can approach a court of competent jurisdiction to enforce your fundamental human right. You can seek legal address, that's legal address. You can approach a lawyer to do that for you, or you can write to the Nigerian Data Protection Commission stating that my data has been breached, my data has been violated.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate how you've been able to do justice to all
It's
our
a pleasure.
questions for the day. And I'm sure that if perhaps I invite you to come on the show again,
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
really
you so
appreciate
much.
it. Now, viewers, that's the much we can take on the program today. You can get to read our top stories on our website, www.kaftanpost.com. I would like you to visit our website, www.kaftan.tv, or link us up on all our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Now, this will draw the curtain on the show to come back again next week. I remain Khalid. Bada.